Good afternoon, and welcome to our annual Economic Outlook Lunch. I am Peter Tillman, Vice President of the Fox Cities Regional Partnership, a division of the Fox Cities Chamber.
And I'm Becky Bartosik, President and CEO of the Fox Cities Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to thank our sponsors today for bringing us the event. Our media partner today is WHBY. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. And our supporting sponsor is Fox Communities Credit Union.
And our presenting sponsor is Investors Community Bank. And I like it. Right here. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tim Schneider, CEO and co-founder. Tim is the CEO of Investors Community Bank and one of the ICB's 4 founders. He has more than 25 years of banking experience in agricultural and commercial banking. Tim volunteers with many business, financial, and charitable organizations, including serving as a New North board member, Wisconsin Business Development Corp board member. Tim is also a great friend of economic development, and this is where I know Tim from. He was the co-founder and past board member of Progress Lakeshore, Manitowoc County's economic development agency.
Can we please give Tim a Fox Cities welcome?
Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe it's morning yet. Getting close, right? Again, we're proud to sponsor this event again this year. What a wonderful crowd today. I understand it's north of 500 people. I think it's a record crowd from what I heard from some of the folks from the chamber, so outstanding. I grew up not far from here in Hilbert, so Appleton is near and dear to my heart. Really like this area. Great things happening up here in the Fox Valley. So as mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Investors Community Bank. We started the bank nearly 22 years ago now. We moved into the Fox Cities by virtue of our merger with the Business Bank back in 2016. We're very proud of our continued growth in all of our markets. I want to highlight a couple of items here for you on our growth in the local market. Our loans in the Appleton office have grown from December 31, 2016. We were at $77 million, and we are today at $110 million in 2 years, so 42% growth, which is outstanding, and that's primarily commercial loans. On the deposit side, we've grown about $11 million in that time frame, only about 9%. So I'm going to make a little pitch here at the end to consider us for any of your deposit products. We're looking for dollars, just like every other financial institution in the room today, right? So we're a community bank focused on customers, whether in branch or online. We're growing our technology. We have online banking, mobile banking, and we're launching online account opening very soon. We are one of the market leaders for deposit rates, as I mentioned earlier, so please check out our website. We generally have been at or near the top of the market on all of our money market and CD products, so I'll be happy to have some of your business if possible. We've got a great team of people. I'd like to ask the ICB team that's here today to stand up and be recognized. Thank you, team. We have a great team of people throughout our 4 locations and very proud of the staff that we built up in Appleton here in particular. So now on to the most important topic. I want to introduce our speaker today. Really enjoyed Elliot's presentation last year, so I'm looking forward to it again this year. And if you haven't, I think you'll put a plug in at the end for his daily emails, which are always a quick read and very informative. Elliot Eisenberg, PhD, is an internationally acclaimed economist and public speaker specializing in making the arcana and minutiae of economics fun, relevant, and educational. He earned a BA in economics with first-class honors from McGill University in Montreal, as well as a master's and PhD in public administration from Syracuse University. Eisenberg, a former senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders in Washington, D.C., is the creator of the Multifamily Stock Index, the first nationally recognized index to track the total return of public firms principally involved in the ownership and management of apartments. The author of more than 85 articles, serves on the expert advisory board of Mortgage Market Guide, and is a regular consultant to several large real estate professional associations, hedge funds, and investment advisory groups. He has spoken to hundreds of business groups and associations, often as a keynote speaker. Dr. Eisenberg has been invited to testify before lawmakers and is often asked to comment on proposed legislation. His research and opinions have been featured in Bloomberg, Businessweek, Bureau of National Affairs, Forbes, Fortune, and many other publications. He is a regularly featured guest on cable news programs, talk, and public radio. Dr. Eisenberg is the chief economist for the Graphs and Laughs LLC, an economic consulting firm that serves a variety of clients across the United States. He writes a syndicated column and authors a daily 70-word commentary on the economy. He is a frequent speaker on topics including economic forecast, economic impact of industries such as home building and tourism, consequences of government regulations, strategic business development, and other current economic issues. Elliott has visited 49 of 50 states and 45 out of 50 state capitals. Ask him which one he is missing. His interests include keeping the rate of restoration of his 60-year-old house ahead of its rate of deterioration and doting on his daughter. He loves ice hockey and talking economics with crowds large and small. If you'd like to get information on having Dr. Eisenberg speak to your group, please contact him by completing a form that will be provided. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Eisenberg. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I was here a year ago, and a year ago I just gave you good news. I just lied, and it was easy, and it worked, and you invited me back. But this year, the news isn't quite as good. So I have to decide, how much do I lie to come back, and how much truth do I tell you? It's a complicated decision. But being serious about things, I think the most important thing that I want you to walk away with is, yeah, we're going to have a recession sometime. I don't think it's this year. I really don't. There's too much economic stimulus in our economy. Yeah, Europe is weak, and China's weak, and Japan, and there are problems in trade, and we'll get into all this stuff. But I think that there's more than enough fiscal stimulus and decent consumer sentiment out there to get us through 2019. Do I think there'll be a recession in 2020? Yeah, I think there's a decent chance, but I don't know. There's no guarantees. A year and a half ago, my thinking was we had a year and a half before I got nervous. So in early 18, I thought, okay, by mid-19, that's as far as my crystal ball goes. Now I think 12 months ahead, because things have gotten a little more dicey. Doesn't mean we're going to have a recession in 2020, but I really don't see it in 2019, and here's why. So GDP is composed of these four terms, C, I, G, X minus M. C is household consumption. It's terrific. Job growth is good. We'll look at the details. Wage growth is as good as it's been in over a decade, so that's pretty good. Households have more money. They're feeling pretty good. We'll look at the data more seriously. The next term is, I, corporate investment in plant and equipment. It's okay. It ain't great. Manufacturing has problems and so on, trade issues and so on, oil prices, whatever, but it won't collapse. So I will be flat, C is strong, I is flat. The third term is G, government spending. It won't be as stimulative as it was last year, but it's still plenty stimulative. So if you've got strong C, which is almost 70% of GDP, so almost nothing else matters if C is strong, at 68% of GDP, and you've got decent G, it's pretty hard to get a recession. I mean, it could happen, a meteor shower, a nuclear exchange with North Korea, things happen. But realistically speaking, this is a low probability event. Now, GDP, the other thing to keep, last but not least, exports, the last term, they'll be a little worse because the dollar is strengthening. And as our dollar strengthens, because our economy is fundamentally performing better than Europe and Japan and China is slowing, they're going faster but slowing, our dollar goes up in value, it hurts exports and so on. So exports, the last term will be down, I will be flat, but C will be strong and G will be good, and you get a decent economy out of that. The numbers aren't spectacular, and today happened to be a particularly crummy day on the data front. We had very weak inflation numbers and lousy retail sales numbers, but this can be explained because GDP is slowing. That's the other key thing to keep in mind. Last year, we had something like 3% growth, 2.9, no one knows. The government closed, we may never know, you know. Another whole conversation. But this year, we'll have 2.3, maybe 2.4. Next year, we'll have 2 or 1.9. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but you can certainly see this decline, right? You don't have to have a PhD or anything to see 3, 2.4, 2. So that's what's going on. And when your economy's slowing and you're used to a good, solid economy, you get these negative economic surprises every so often because we're bumping along at 3 and now we've got to get to 2.5 or 2.4 or 2.3. Well, things have to deteriorate to some extent. And that's what we're seeing. There's nothing awful. We're going to return to our fundamental growth level, which is roughly 2%. That's as fast as our economy can fundamentally grow, given population growth and labor productivity growth, and we'll get into that too. But this is a return. 2018 was a great year. It was the best year we had, I think, since 2010, and the second best since the recession in 2008. So I hope you enjoyed it. It's not coming back. That's why the economy's slowing down, sales aren't so hot, and this and that. Let's look at the details. So here, this is the stock market. It's okay. It's been buffered around. There's been lots of uncertainty, the closure and trade, and Europe slowing, and all these surprises and shocks to the economy. Yet the market does okay. Earnings to date have been pretty good. They'll slow. We'll talk about that a little too. The next thing, but here's where you get interesting things. This is consumer sentiment. And there are 3 groups that put it out: University of Michigan, Bloomberg, and a third group whose name at the moment escapes me. They all show pretty much the same thing. Nice increasing trend and then decline. And the thing to remember is GDP is slowing, one. And the second thing is all these years, 2000, you only have a couple years on this graph, the last couple years, 16, 17, and 18. But suffice it to say that during 2016 and 2017, 2/3 of the visible graph here, we were growing at roughly 2.2% of GDP, 2.2% GDP growth. And so we could go down considerably further from where we are now, down to the mid-50s or lower 50s, and that would be fine, thank you very much. It would return us to 2% growth, which is the trend line where we're going. So that things are deteriorating is no surprise. Growth is going to fall from 3 to roughly 2 over the next 12, 15, 18, or 24 months by the end of 2020. Something's got to give here. Some sentiment's got to go, sales got to go down. But not necessarily a recession. That's the important thing. Recessions occur. Why do recessions happen? Recessions happen because of mistakes or shocks. You know, an oil price spike or a war or something, that would be an external shock, or a fundamental policy mistake. Macro policy goes wrong, tax policy goes wrong, monetary policy goes wrong, or fiscal policy goes wrong. It's hard to predict a mistake. Look, I married my ex-wife. At the time, it seemed okay. It just didn't work out that way. I, as an economist, couldn't predict. I was going headlong into a mistake. These things happen. So don't worry. This decline is okay. It's not surprising. The decline may continue a bit for a while longer. Doesn't mean things are bad. It means they're just less good than they were. Similarly here, this is small business sentiment, and put up by the National Federation of Independent Business. And you can see here, there's clearly a decline at the very far right. At the peak, just before the decline, that was like last July or August or something, that was the highest number in the history of this series that lasted 45 years. Since then, we've declined a bit. But we're still pretty high. And remember, during this duration of 2000, here, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all of those years, GDP was growing at 2.2 on average. So there's no real problem if this declines a bunch more points. I'd like it not to, don't get me wrong, but it's no tragedy if it does, right? And now what do we see here locally? This is data put out by the Chamber from surveys that they collect. And they ask, look at sales activity. How's sales activity going to be in 2019? This is Appleton here, not national data. How is things looking? And you can see here, 2019, not as good as 2018. As good as 2017, not as good as, you get the idea, but we're clearly going to come down here. That's just the way it is. You're not immune here. I know you think you live in the center of the universe and nothing affects you, but I hate to tell you, Not so much the case. So what you see locally is very similar to what we're seeing nationally. Here, local firm profits in 2019. How's it going to be? Oh, it's going to be down. It's going to be down. Same is up, behind, a little higher. So this is okay. This is mimicking national trends here. So what you see and how you feel is how pretty much everybody else feels. Here's one more local slide. Rate local economic vitality. It's a little bit down. You know, it's still very good, right? Average is up and very good is down. Because this is what's happening. Fiscal stimulus is going away. We're running out of workers. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. These are problems everybody has. You have them actually more severe here. Unemployment here is like below 3%. It's crazy, right? You're a petri dish of experimentation. What do you do when there are no workers? You bring them in from Puerto Rico or something, right? It's ridiculous. Right? Look at light vehicle sales. A real discretionary purchase. Nobody has to buy a new car, right? You can fix your existing car. You can buy a pair of tires or a used alternator or whatever it is. So car sales are declining a little bit. A couple years ago in 2016, we had the record car sales, 17.5 million units. Last year, we were about 17.2. That's a decline of 300,000 units, or a big 2%. Yeah. Who cares? I mean, yeah, it matters, I guess, if you own a car dealership and your sales are down 2%, but this is hardly a tragedy. This is not a recession. This is just a slight slowdown as we cool from 3 last year to 2 next year. Right? This year, maybe we hit 16.9. Again, it's lower than 17.2, another 2% decline. You know, if I had a 96 average in college and it fell to 94, yeah, my grades are down. It's not a problem, right? You can get a C and still get a lovely degree. I have a lot of friends, right? No one cares. 2%, 3%, sure it matters, but the recession, avoiding the recession is more important. And this is as fast as we can grow. We're growing above trend because of the tax cuts and the spending increases that happen, which we'll talk about too. So we're okay. And what do we buy? Look at the cars we're buying. So total car sales, as you see, I mentioned, they peaked in 15 or 16 and have been trending down slightly since. But look at the makeup of what we're buying. No one's buying a car anymore. Unless you're old or boring. I'm both. I'm old and boring. I have a 4-door sedan. My daughter won't even be seen in my car. Like I'm going to drop her off at her friend's house. Papa, can you park like 2 blocks away and let me out? I don't want to be seen. You need to buy an SUV or a crossover or something nice. You know, thanks very much. I love you too. But the car prices keep going up, so total dollars spent on cars are good. We're just buying fewer of them because they're now much more expensive, right? So cars, RV sales are good. Another discretionary purchase. Households are feeling pretty good about themselves because incomes are up. Unemployment is low. Wages are doing better. That's what the average American cares about. Rich Americans care about the stock market. It's not unimportant, don't get me wrong, and it matters a lot to the economy, but low unemployment is really the single most, and decent wage growth are what's important, and we're starting to get some decent wage growth. And if you look hard, you can see problems. You know, car sales are tipping down a bit, consumer sentiment, business sentiment, whatever. You can look at this graph too, and if you look hard, you can find something to complain about. It's always possible. I could be more beautiful, I could lose 5 more pounds, you know, whatever. If you look at this graph here, the vertical lines are total dollars spent on renovations, alterations, and repairs. And you can see they're going straight up. But the line on top, the snaky line, that tells you the rate of growth year over year. And you can see here, it was in the 7s, and now it's going into the 6s. Is that down? The rate of growth is down, but you're still going up. So again, keep perspective here. A little decline in car sales, home renovations going up a little bit more slowly. This is okay. This is fine. I wish it weren't happening. I agree. I understand. But it's not a tragedy. Are households borrowing more money? You better believe it. Hey, our sponsor, Mr. Schwartz, you got to be a happy man here. They want to get houses, cars, autos, whatever it is. This is pretty good news. We're feeling good about ourselves. All these years of increased total sales. Interesting. Mortgages, interestingly, look at the very last column. The one on the bottom, yellow, is mortgage debt. And notice that this quarter, it actually declined from last quarter. Despite home prices going up like crazy, there's no housing bubble. I'll show a couple more slides later. But we are getting late in a cycle. That's why we're fearful about a recession. Oh, we've had a recovery. It's almost 10 years. In June, at the end of June, this is a 10-year recovery. In July 1st, it becomes the longest recovery in history. And you can see, look at this graph. You can see here, for example, on auto loans, right? Auto loans, default rates are going up. Credit cards, they're going up. For the bankers in the audience, let me tell you, the worst of loans are made in the best of times. Remember that. Times are good. We're feeling happy. Everything's great. You have underwriters who've never made a bad loan. They're like 29, and they think they're brilliant. And they don't know anything. They're just a lucky victim of circumstance. Being a day trader in 1998 was great until it wasn't in 2000, right? Same thing with these underwriters at a bank. I have no money. I want to get a car. Sure, we'll give you money. No problem. Because look, all my loans, nothing defaults. But they're going up because we're later in a cycle. So I want you to be careful. A recession could come in 2020 or 2021. By 2021, the chance of having had a recession get pretty big by that point because GDP growth keeps slowing. But mortgage debt's good and overall default rates remain low, but there's clearly, trouble lurking here and there. But you put it together, household consumption, almost 70% of GDP is C, the first term, is doing great. It's growing at roughly 3% of GDP. If it falls to 2.5 or 2.25, that's still good enough. That's where we'll go over the next 2 years. There's no problem. See, the households are good, labor markets are good, wage growth is good. We'll talk about that. Let's look at the next term, I, corporate investments in plant and equipment. Oil prices are a big deal. America produces tons of oil. We have to invest to look for oil. Oil exploration and production is expensive. Pipelines are production. Ethane cracker plants and distillation facilities are expensive. Higher oil, lots of investment. That's good for that. Hurts us as consumers. At the price we're now at, like $55 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate basic U.S. oil, that's neither good or bad for the economy. It's fine. We as consumers are happy, and the oil patch is happy enough as well, so that's fine. But if oil prices hit 70, for example, we as consumers would be unhappy, but corporate investment would skyrocket. And the differences now are very small because we produce now 12 million barrels of oil. We're the world's #1 producer of oil, and I think the world's #1 producer of natural gas as well, and hydrocarbons for sure. So oil prices and natural gas prices matter a lot to our economy, and higher is not necessarily bad because there's so much more investment that goes on, but we're not going to have that now because prices aren't that high. And corporate profits aren't going to be going up. That survey that the chamber did, we saw that, right? Expectations for 19 are lower. Why? Because tax reform is done. And tax reform has given us all a huge tax cut in 2018 compared to 17. But now it's over. We're not going to get another tax cut. We've habituated to it. It's like if you take drugs and you shoot yourself up. I don't know this, but I just read about it in the paper. You need more. You need a bigger fix all the time. So you're rolling winos in the park to afford your drug habit. It gets more expensive. The first hit's fun and cheap, but you need more. The tax cut's over. It's done. We're not going to get more tax cuts. Now you have to earn your way to more money. Top line increases or bottom line increases or whatever it is. But firms aren't going to be quite so excited because profits aren't going up quite so fast as they did. They're not going to have quite as much retained earnings as they had before. But they'll be okay. Profit's still good, thank you very much. Unfortunately, agricultural prices, not so good. It almost doesn't matter which area of ag you're in. They all suck. There are exceptions. Hogs are looking pretty good because they're killing them all in China because of African swine flu. But, there are exceptions here and there. But by and large, it's weak. The saving grace, land prices remain high. And the firms that are there now have survived to date, and they will continue to survive, and prices at some point turn around inevitably, right? But it's been a very difficult time for farmers. There's no question about it, right? That also discourages investment. And you can look in this slide here. This is manufacturing activity. And you can see manufacturers, their sentiment has gone way down. The black horizontal line in the middle is neutrality. If you're below it, you're in recession. Above the line, you're growing. They're growing, and you can see the latest numbers here are up there and up there. So I think we've probably stabilized. But there's a stronger dollar, trade problems, right, and global slowing. This is naturally causing manufacturers to go, whoa, I'm a little nervous about this. So manufacturing's pulling back a little bit. Depends how much export activity you are. The more export related you are, the more concerned you are. If you're purely a domestic company, it matters much less. But overall, it all matters. A big company invests less in new stuff. It filters into other companies and so on. But manufacturing isn't thrilled. But the saving grace for the economy is that manufacturing is a smaller percent of GDP. It used to be absolutely huge. So many of us used to work in manufacturing. Now we're a post-manufacturing society, right? Now we spend all our money on our phones. I have Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all these other things on my phone. That's where I spend my money, right? So even if manufacturing goes into a recession like it did here in 2015, didn't cause a national recession, so we can withstand a mild recession in manufacturing. It'll be fine. And look at this. This is services. It's doing okay. And this is, again, roughly 70% of GDP is services. So services are good. Consumer sentiment's pretty good. Wage growth, which we'll talk about, is getting better. Unemployment is super low. This is okay. We'll be fine. We really should be fine. You put it together. This is corporate investment in equipment. Not plant, but equipment, core capital goods, things you buy to make your business do more business. So you're buying software, hardware, lathes, trucks, robots, artificial intelligence, whatever it is, right? It's not going up anymore. You can see it's pretty flat, right? It's flat on the top. But that's okay. Look at this decline here. Look at that decline. That was oil prices collapsing from $100 a barrel to 25. And did it cause a national recession? No. So we can withstand the decline in corporate investment in plant and equipment too. Manufacturing can go down a bit. This can go down. So we're not on the edge of a recession that'll be caused by anything. But things are clearly slowing, and corporate investment in equipment may well plateau or decline a bit. That won't cause a recession. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's okay. Now, this is government spending. And this is where I can tell you with confidence that GDP growth will decline. Why? Look at the far right curve on the far right, this big one here, all right? There. The blue are tax cuts. And they stimulated the economy, whoopsie daisy. They stimulated the economy very strongly last year, and they're stimulating it a little less this year. Red is the spending increases of $400 billion that were deficit financed that began they began about a year ago today, and they end about a year from now. And you can see they're very stimulative in 18 and a little less stimulative in 19. If you look at the overall effects of these, the 4 bars in 18 on average are bigger than the 4 bars in 19 because the fiscal stimulus is going away. But it's still well above the horizontal axis. This is really important. The axis is neutral. And we're fundamentally we're being much more stimulated than neutral right now. That's why it's hard to see a recession coming when you still have, this much fiscal stimulus coming. Again, these 4 bars are smaller than those 4, so GDP goes down, but it's not an awful thing. We're gonna go, as I said, from 3 to 2.4, 2.9 to 2.3, or whatever it ends up being, right? It's okay. Now, let's talk about trade briefly. The problem that trade is facing are a couple problems. One of them is the strengthening of the US dollar. The dollar has surprisingly strengthened. A year ago, it was here at the bottom of this V on the far right, all right? And then suddenly it goes up. We thought a year ago that Europe was gonna do well, that Japan was gonna do better, that China wasn't gonna slow so much or so quickly. And all those plans, poof, out the window. And who's the cleanest shirt in the drawer, like Johnny Cash says in one of his songs? Turns out we are. So there's urge to buy the dollar because our economy's better, higher interest rates, higher rates of return on bonds, and so on and so forth. And that's what's happening. You see this increase in the dollar here was unexpected on the far right. It's hurting manufacturing, it's hurting exports, it's boosting imports. That pushes down GDP a little bit. So trade will hurt a little bit. And on top of that, there's the trade war with China that's going on right now. And we can argue whether it's a good policy or not. I think it's worth taking the risk of this trade war if we get China to fundamentally change things. If we accept a deal where they buy more soybeans and corn, we will have essentially screwed ourselves. We'll have gotten all the disadvantages and none of the advantages. But if we get China to fundamentally stop stealing our technology forced transfers and so on, blocking Google and Amazon from getting in there and Facebook and whatever, all those other things, and not playing by the rules of the game, if you will, that would be worth doing it for sure. But either way, we've paid a price. GDP is down by 0.2 of a point because of trade. We import and export less. China imports and export less. The trade war between us and China has hurt us and China, and Europe and Japan as well. Europe and Japan more because they depend on China more for trade than we do. So we're bringing down global growth. And solving this problem may not be easy. I tend to think we will solve it. But I must admit, in the very short run, my biggest fear about global growth, or our economy, going into recession, is purely trade related. If this China thing isn't resolved and Trump tacks on more fees, raises from 10 to 25 the tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods, and we impose tariffs on European cars and Japanese cars, and we don't get new NAFTA called USMCA done, and Trump abrogates NAFTA, the original NAFTA from '92. If all those things happen, okay, all bets are off. That could really cause consumer sentiment to go to hell. And it's possible, very unlikely, but distinctly possible in the short run. So trade is my #1 short run fear. So trades cost us, the dollars cost us. Here's manufacturing. This is manufacturing activity. And you can see it. The slowdown starts when the trade war begins. Manufacturers get nervous. It's harder to get things. Things are more expensive. There are tariffs. I have to go through different suppliers and so on and so forth. Suddenly things are worse. All these manufacturing purchasing manager indices that all countries do all decline and so on and so forth. And if you add to that slowing growth. So look at this graph. Just look at the direction of the lines. It doesn't matter. They're all going inwards. The top number, the lightest gray number, was the first estimate of GDP growth for 2019. It was in the summer. Then in October, they do a revision. And then in January, I guess they do a new revision, end of January. This is the World Bank or the IMF. And you can, it's in the bottom, IMF. You can see it declines. So their forecasts for the same calendar year, 2019, decline over time for virtually every single place. Geography, country, or location. China, Germany, France, Latin America, Middle East, who cares? Emerging markets, we're all slowing. Well, when you're slowing, it's hard for us to be exceptional. We're going to be caught up in some of this slowing as well for 19. And now expand it out to 2021. And you can see it again. Global growth again. You see the lines falling inward here. Every country's falling in a little bit or a lot. So the globe is cooling now. The globe is cooling later. Our fiscal stimulus is declining. This is the reality we face right now. It's slowing. But just because we slow doesn't mean we're going to have a recession. A recession occurs because a mistake happens. Of course, the chances of a mistake causing a recession increase as GDP growth goes down. Think of yourself as a cyclist. Cycling, you're going fast, you're going 20 miles an hour, it's going down a hill and you're going fast, 25 miles an hour, maybe I don't know how fast you can go on a bike. And then some crosswind comes across. But you're going 25 miles an hour. You can withstand the wind because you've got good momentum. But what if you're going 5 miles an hour on a flat surface and this wind comes? It knocks you over. GDP growth is the speed of the cyclist. The crosswind is the recessionary likelihoods. They just go up as GDP falls. So a long enough time at 2% GDP growth, and you're going to get a recession. The central bank makes a mistake, Congress makes a mistake, China makes a mistake, something bad happens. So that's why I think by the end of 21, we probably get a recession. But I don't think it happens this year because there's, again, too much stimulus going on. This is GDP growth. This is as good as it gets. You can see here, 2010 was a little better. We had a moment of betterness compared to now. But this was a really good year. It's not going to come back, but it's not going to be bad. That's the important thing. Why are we going to slow down? Why do I keep telling you the mantra of roughly 2%, 1.9, come the end of 2020? It's because of this. This is the problem we face. Blue is the number of new workers in the economy. It's really meager. Population growth is just weak. 3.8 million babies born last year. Last year was the slowest U.S. growth in total population since records began being kept in 1931. 0.6%. Well, 18, 16 years later, those kids go into the labor force, right? We don't have a lot of kids right now. And red is productivity growth. Those are the only two things that boost GDP. More people working, or the people working more efficiently and making more stuff. So you have a pizza parlor, and you make 10 pizzas an hour, but now you make 11 pizzas an hour. So you make more profit, or if you're a worker, you get paid $1 a pizza, you make an extra $1 an hour, things are good, you're happy, right? But now I tell you, not 10, it's 10.001. Oh, who cares? I can't pay you a pay raise now. Your productivity hasn't increased. So no productivity increases and no more people coming to work. You want to make America great or make America great again, depending on your political persuasion. You know how to do it? Stay home at night, make love, for God's sake. And from what I understand, again, I don't know this for a fact, but I heard on the radio that making love is actually fun. You can enjoy yourself. Yeah, endorphins are released. That's just what I read. I don't really know. So we're going to slow because this is what our economy can produce. This is the best we can do. In terms of contemporaneous economic data, this is data through what, Feb 2 or Feb 3 in the top right-hand, top corner it says, Feb 2. That's the latest data on that graph. You have to get to -1 in this graph to think about having a recession, to think about it. No, we're not there. There's nothing in the cards now saying we are near or on a recession. Later in the year, who knows? But I'm telling you, I really think the probabilities of recession this year, although elevated, they're probably twice as high this year as they were last year. Last year, they were 12, 13%. Now they're 25, 28%. A meaningful jump up, but nothing really high. If it gets to 40 or 45, that's when I begin to have a rash and need to take drugs. Okay, we're okay now. We really are okay. I mean, you can think about it. And are we going to have a recession? One of the best measures of recessions is yield curve inversion. Okay, you know what the yield curve inversion is because you guys are bankers. The yield curve looks like this normally. This is years on the bottom axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30. This is interest rates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not surprisingly, the longer you borrow money for, the more it costs to get the money because the lender's taking risk, interest rate risk, default risk, credit risk, all kinds of risks. Occasionally, the yield curve inverts and short-term money, 1-year money, 2-year money becomes more expensive than 30-year money. Don't spend time thinking about this. It's not productive. I've spent most of my youth thinking about this. When I discovered this relationship, I thought I was a genius. And my teacher said, yeah, so what's new? Okay, but notice, by design, in this graph, every time the yield curve inverts, the blue squiggle goes above the red bar, which is 0. And every time the blue squiggle goes above the red bar, with the exception of the very first time back in 1965, on the far left, it's followed by a vertical gray bar. And the vertical gray bar is a recession. So you have an inverted yield curve, you get a recession. Will it happen again this time? Who knows? Last time the yield curve inverted in 2008, dignitaries like Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan said, no, don't worry, this time is different. Well, they were right, but for all the wrong reasons. Last time was different. It was the worst recession ever. That's not what they were thinking. So bright people really make a mistake. If you think this time is different, good for you, but understand why you think it's different and convince yourself you're really right. I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but when you hear this is different, this time is different, things are now different, yikes, that usually gives me like, you're just a lazy, not thinking person here, right? It could be, but I'm not convinced. But the good news is, let's suppose we invert. If we invert, the recession doesn't come tomorrow. Look at the graph and look at when the inversion occurs initially. So for example, there, or there, or there. It still takes, 8, 9, 10, some cases 22 or 23 months to get the recession. So the Fed makes a mistake, the Fed raises rates in July or September, and we get an inverted yield curve. The recession could still take a year to show up. That's why I'm pretty confident saying 2019 looks pretty good, and the Fed's now decided to get off the friggin' brake. I think too much, arguably. We'll talk about that in a few minutes too. But so even if you have it in yield curve inversion, which I don't think we'll get because the Fed's going to try hard not to get us one, because they control the short end of the yield curve very much, less so the long end, but they have some influence there. So I think we're okay. I think I was in Colorado about 2 weeks ago, and I said to them, you know, in 2018, before you went to bed, you took your vape pen, because it's legal in Colorado, not here, so don't do it. And you took 4 hits, and you were really high. Now it's 2019. Take the vape pen, but just take 2 hits. You're gonna be high, but not as high as you were. But it'll be okay. That's the moral of the story. You're still vaping, it's still good. Let's look at labor markets. Labor markets are really tight, and they're tighter here than almost any other place in the country. Wisconsin has remarkably low unemployment rates. So look at unemployment in red. It's 4%, up from a few months ago of 3.7. Now, normally, rising unemployment's a bad thing. This is a great thing. It's good because the labor force participation rate's going up. It means people who weren't working are working. So we're getting those deadbeats who are sofa surfing at home and sponging off you. They're saying, wow, unemployment's at a 49-year low. I bet I can find a job. Because someone like you, what's your name? Dave. Someone like Dave, if someone as incompetent and unqualified as Dave can find a job, anybody can find a job. So firms now are hiring cons, ex-cons, underage kids, and I'm joking about that, but firms are desperate for workers. This is a good sign for the labor, and these people are coming in who haven't worked in a long time. A guy who retired at 50 and got bored, a woman who maybe had a baby 5 years ago and didn't think she wanted to return to work is now coming back. This is good. This is a good sign here. When the labor force goes up, then you're happy if unemployment goes up. It's not a problem. The other graph on this line is the blue line. That's first-time claims for unemployment. And interestingly enough, that line is a good economic coincidence to leading economic indicator. Job growth is not employment growth, but blue is, and blue is people who lose their jobs. They're either fired or laid off, so involuntary unemployment. They qualify for unemployment, and they file for it. And that number has been below 300,000. Tell them I'm busy. Has been below 300,000 now for 201 straight weeks, a record. And when your first-time claims for unemployment are 300,000 or lower, that means you're creating jobs. That's a net job creation economy. So we're now at 220 or 225. That's really low, but it's up from where it was a few months ago when it was just 210 or 215. So clearly our economy is slowing. There's no question. You can see it all over the place, little bits here and little bits there. I'm not going, whoa, holy cow, we're going into the garbage can. No, we're just two-toe, one, but we're still grabbing the pen. That's the important thing, all right? Look here, this is quit rates. People quit their job, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. They're feeling, I can get another job that pays me more money. There are lots of jobs available. There are people chasing me, headhunters, whatever, job wanted signs, or I know somebody, I have a job offer already, right? And then you can go to your boss and you can say, take this job, and as Johnny Cash would say, shove it. This is good. The numbers, the people quitting their jobs, look at the blue line. It's been solidly 2.3% or higher for the last 7 or 8 months. The peak of the housing boom was 1 month of 2.3. Now we're solidly 2.3. And what makes this even more interesting is that we're older now. The US population, we've aged. The average US age is rising because this lump of boomers is getting older. So we're older, and you figure older people don't take that risk. Older people, they don't friggin' buy green bananas. And now we're quitting our job. So we're feeling really good. Quits are up. This is a great sign. First-time claims for unemployment is low. Unemployment rates are low. Labor force participation rate is rising. More Americans are working. Last year, we created 2.64 million jobs. 12 months ending January, we created 2.8 million jobs. These are staggeringly high numbers. The labor force is strong. That drives C. That's the juice that drives C. It's wage growth and more people working, both, that what drives household consumption. What's the biggest problem small business faces? They can't find workers. Normally, what does small business care about? Boring stuff, taxes, regulation, things you don't care about. But no, the big fear that sales are bad. No, they're happy on all those fronts. They just can't find workers. I mean, raise your hands if you have a hard time finding workers. It's a real problem. Yeah, right. So labor markets are tight. So you'd expect wage growth to be great, right? We're at 50-year lows in this and 20-year lows in that, and best since the recession or best since the dot-com boom. Not quite. And this is interesting. So this is the data. This is wage growth over the last 10 years. On the far left-hand corner, the bottom left, wage growth was under 2%. We were coming out of the worst recession in U.S. history, outside the Depression. Wage growth was a meager 1.8%. Unemployment was 10. You'd think that now wage growth would be friggin' amazing. You'd think it would be spectacular. And what is it? Like 3.2? The best it's been since the onset of the recession, I agree. So we have, 2.8 million more workers working, and on average, everybody's getting a 3.2% pay raise. That's boosting total pay by over 5%. That's why C is strong, because we can afford to spend on cars and boats and RVs and vacations and whatever it is, because more of us are working and each of us has more money. But it's a little better than that. There are a whole bunch of reasons why wage inflation's weak and overall inflation's weak. But one of the key ones is demographic. The demographics go like this. Older people retire and younger people enter the labor force. I know this is shocking. I know. The difference is right now, these two clumps of people, groups are almost the same size. The number of boomers retiring is about 11,000 a day. The number of millennials, or now Gen Zers actually, entering the labor force is 14,000 a day. Never have the sizes of the two groups been so close. So let's do a thought experiment. Let's say, okay, you're old. That's not an experiment, that's fact. Right, but you look good for 87. You look awesome. You're buff and good. So you're on the verge of retirement. You're making, let's say, $250,000 a year. Okay, because you're good at what you do, and you're retiring because your career's been great, but you're done. And you're starting your career. You're 22. You just finished college. You're 21, and you're making $250,000. You're making $25,000. So $25,000, 14,000 people making $25,000. Offsetting 11,000 people making $250,000. That's driving down wages mechanically. If you ignore that problem and get rid of that demographic problem, wage growth goes from 3.2 to 4. That's much better. Global supply chains are keeping it down. Lack of unionization is keeping it down. Uber's keep a whole bunch of things. I can give you a long explanation for why wage inflation isn't so strong, but it is a surprise that economists really didn't see. We thought that by now, with unemployment this low, you'd see wage pressure starting to build. And remember, labor productivity sucks. So if you're paying your workers based on what they're doing, they're not making more loans, they're not selling more pizzas, they're not, selling more automobiles or making more cups or whatever it is, right? So you can't pay them more because their output isn't better. So there's a whole bunch of reasons. But because wage growth isn't all that seriously high, and what's the single most biggest expense firms have, generally? Wages. Well, if wages aren't so bad, then inflation's not likely to be all that bad, right? And sure enough, you'd be right. There really isn't much inflation, despite the fact that we're late in a business cycle. And unemployment's at near a 49-year low at 4%, up from 3.7 just a few months ago. So very low unemployment, but not much wage inflation, which we discussed. And therefore not much overall inflation here. This is CPI data from yesterday. There's just nothing really going on there. Again, you'd think late in the cycle you'd get something, wages are going up, inflation's getting worse, so firms raise prices, they raise prices, workers want more money, cost pull and demand push inflation go up, commodity prices are going up, the Fed starts to raise rates, they raise rates too much, and they drive us into recession. That's sort of the normal story. Fed raises rates too much to cool an economy that's going too fast. But our economy's cooling. I told you already, we're already on autopilot to go from 3 to 2.5 to 2 through 2019 and 2020. So we're cooling. What else is going on? Wage growth is really low. Okay, what else? China, magical China. Traditionally, China didn't matter. Until 2008 or 9, they weren't big enough to make a difference. But now they're the second biggest economy in dollar terms on the planet at $13 trillion economy. Ours is roughly 20. So what happens to them matters, and they're cooling. So commodity prices that they don't buy so much, prices go down. Wage inflation, not so much. Fiscal policy becoming less expansionary. Monetary policy becoming a little less expansionary. So suddenly everything's going in reverse, kind of conveniently. And this is letting the Fed take its time. And it's letting inflation's not getting bad. Global slowing, China slowing, dollar strengthening a bit, Europe weakening. You don't see inflation. Red is core inflation, no food and energy. Blue is headline with food and energy. Economists ignore blue because they just bounce around for no good reason. You know, a war in the Middle East or a drought in Ukraine or a bumper crop in Australia or some stupid thing like that. And after a few months, the problem goes away. That's why blue reverts to red. Over a long time, they always go together, but blue is bouncing around. The Fed wants it at 2%. It's pretty close. But the Fed doesn't look at CPI. This is CPI. The Fed looks at something called PCE, this graph, and look at it. Do you see something in the red that says inflation's going to jump out at you? No, we're nervous. We're nervous because unemployment's low. We're late in the cycle. Unemployment's low. We're running out of workers. We're creating a lot of jobs. We can't sustain this job growth because we don't have enough people to do it, really. That's why unemployment is so low. Workers are getting scarce. Aren't you going to bid up the price of workers? Isn't that going to lead to cost inflation? Isn't that going to lead to leading into producer prices, pushing it onto buyers eventually? Doesn't seem to be. So the Fed can take its time, but here's the fear the Fed has. In the background, this is the fear. Look at this graph. And this graph makes you both very happy and very unhappy all at once. Same graph, two very different emotions. It's obvious, you can tell, right? Let's go through the graph. Blue tells you how big our economy can be under ideal conditions. So optimal GDP growth, proper inflation numbers, good GDP growth, low unemployment, everything's perfect. Blue. So we have here 13 trillion, 15 trillion, 17 trillion dollars, and so on. Blue. Red tells us how big our economy is at any given minute. Notice when you have a gray bar, they diverge because the blue keeps going up because it doesn't see the recession, but the red sees the recession, and factories are shuttered and people are laid off and suddenly GDP declines. You with me so far? And then a couple years later, what happens? Red catches up to blue. Right here. Red catches up. Yay! Red catches up. Red catches up. Here too. Red catches up. This is good news. So we catch up from recessions. Recessions bring down growth, and then over a couple years, we get back to trend, more or less. All right, more or less. That's the good part of the graph. Now, what's the bad part of the graph? What's the part that keeps the Fed up at night? What are the conditions that prevail prior to the recession? Look at the color blue and look at the color red. What happens just before we enter a recession? They touch or red goes above blue. Where are we now? The Fed thinks red's above blue right now. We don't know. No one knows this for sure. But that's the fear. Unemployment is so damn friggin' low. Something bad has to happen. That's why 6 weeks ago the Fed said they're going to raise rates a couple more times this year. And the market had apoplexy, and it fell like 17 or 19% like in an hour. And then 2 weeks ago the Fed said, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Oh, forgive us, Father. You know, we don't know. Okay, we're sorry. We're not going to raise rates, we promise. They don't have to raise rates because there's no inflation. They want to raise rates to keep the inflation from happening. But now they're saying, let's see the whites of their eyes before we shoot. They're taking a page out of the Revolutionary War, right? Let's see the inflation first, then we'll raise it. Now, the fear of doing that is once the inflation genie gets out of the bottle, it starts to go up, maybe too much. But they're prepared to take that risk because raising right now when there's no inflation just doesn't seem to make much sense. So how fast are rates going to go up? Well, no one really knows, but here's 40 years of monetary policy theory in one graph. And all it says is the taller the central banker chair is, the higher interest rates are. Schwartz, stop working, man. You don't have to figure it out. It's right there. all right? And they shouldn't hire you as a central banker. You're out. I may love you, but you're too tall. What? Powell's taller, then you're off the hook. You'd have been a better selection in that case. I'm calling Trump right now. So what's really going to happen? I mean, who really knows? But this is my gut feeling, because that's all you've really got to go by. The economy's big. Who knows how fast GDP will go up next year? It's hard to know. Right now, let's go back one. Right now, Fed funds is between 2.25 and 2.5. This is the number the Fed determines. They do interest rate maneuvers. They sell and buy bonds and all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to get into it. They determine that's the band of Fed funds. Now, I think we get one more rate hike this year. I think trade disputes go away. I think our growth's a little better. I think Europe picks up before the end of the year. China does some stimulus thing. And we have a nice cheery 6 or 8 months. And the Fed raises once. And then we're done. That's it. And you can see here, by the end of next year, we're down by 1/4 point. And the following year, we're down by 1/4 point again. Why? We're down because, remember, GDP growth is going down from 3 to roughly 2.5 this year to roughly 2 next year. You got a 2% GDP. You can't have a Fed funds rate of 2.6. That will drive you into recession all by itself. You have to bring down rates. GDP and interest rates are highly correlated for a reason. Slower growth, you have to have slower GDP. Slower GDP, you have to have slower rates. Now, this assumes no recession. If we get a recession, I promise you now, rates will go to 0, like they did back in 2009. They'll have to go to 0 because they're already low. Traditionally, when the Fed starts to lower rates in a rate-reducing cycle, they drop them by roughly 5 percentage points or 500 basis points. But now they've only got roughly 2.5 points or 250 basis points to go before they're at 0. So they'll go to 0, and then they'll do other things, quantitative easing and forward guidance and all kinds of crazy weird stuff, because they got no choice. But rates, the key thing here is twofold. One, rates aren't going up much. That much I can tell you, because our economy is not going to grow very fast. But even though rates don't go up much, if the Fed's not careful, 1 or 2 hikes or not lowering fast enough come 2020 and 2020 could still cause a recession. So they have a delicate balancing act here. They may have to raise a little or start to lower, but they'll wait and see the data and see how it turns out. Now, let's talk about housing. We all own homes. We all care about housing. It's one of our biggest investments. The housing market's really messed up. There's no other way to say it. So look here, you can see here, this is total construction activity, residential in red. It's declining. How could it be declining? Last year, 2.64 million jobs, 3.23% wage growth roughly, super economy, fabulously low unemployment, and construction activity declines? This is why. Look at the blue. Blue is single fam. Builders have stopped building single-fam houses. It's just they can't be bothered. They're beyond it. It's like stupid. Forget it. I'll stay home. I'll watch TV, whatever. I'll smoke pot, whatever. Why build this? It's not fun. But they can't. They can't make any money building an entry-level home. They don't build enough homes. We're vastly underbuilt. We're underbuilt on an annual basis by 400,000 units. Last 10 years, 4 million units. And that's the fundamental problem. It's not just Appleton, it's not just Wisconsin, it's not just the upper Midwest, it's not just the Midwest, it's the whole country. Every single place I go to, builders are unable to build an entry-level home and make any money at it. Multifam, which is in the bottom, one of those colors on the bottom, is fine. Purple in the second to bottom is multifam, and red is renovations, alterations, and repairs. They're totally fine. But the builders can't build those cookie cutter, 300, 500, 1,000 unit single fam places, tract housing at the edge of the city, because they can't make any money at it. This is total construction activity. Blue is multifam, flat, decent, back where it historically has been. Red is single fam. It's way low. That's the problem with the housing market. Underbuilding, lots of job growth, good household formation, bidding wars for homes, essentially. Okay, it's dying down of late. We'll talk about that in a second, too. But basically, we just don't have enough homes. Creating jobs and no homes. This is a recipe for house price increases. More demand, no supply. You don't need this as a freshman-level economics course, right? So new home sales are flat because new home starts are flat, right? This here, back here, this is starts, they're flat. This is sales. Shockingly, they're flat. Who would think of that? Genius, yeah. But despite the fact that the builders aren't building enough homes, the inventory of new homes is perfect at 325,000. Green is building starts, they've permitted but not started, so there's no home yet. Blue is being built, and red is finished. So it's a built house that's not sold. That's where the builders lose all their money. And we're back at the right level. It's roughly 325,000. That's about right. So the builders aren't building many homes, but the inventory is perfect. And they can't build these cheap homes, so they don't. And we have an inventory shortage, and that drives prices up. And it's a terrible problem. So the builders aren't very happy about it. This is builder sentiment. They're not happy, but there's nothing they can do about it because this is the deck of cards they've been dealt. It's a problem for our economy. People can't move because they can't afford to move where the jobs are. Traditionally, in the US, people who lived in poor states, you can think of Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, I don't want to generalize, but you get my point, they moved north, right? And they moved to big cities like Baltimore and Cleveland and Milwaukee to get manufacturing jobs back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, right? But now you can't do that. Where are the good jobs now? They're in Boston and San Francisco, and home prices there are crazy. A home in like a nice suburb of Boston, Brookline, $1.7 million. 2 suburbs out, Newton, $1.2 million. Are you kidding me? So there's an unemployed guy in Pittsburgh who's a great computer programmer. His house is worth like $1.95. And he'd like to move to San Francisco or San Jose, but he can't afford it. So the way Americans traditionally have moved to prosperity no longer works because there aren't enough houses. It's a colossal macroeconomic problem, but we're not going to solve it today. The key thing is to build more homes, but the builders aren't happy. And look what they're building. This is the average new price in red, median new price in blue. They're much too expensive, these homes that they're building, because they're not building cheap homes. If they built the cheap homes, the price would come down. But they're only building move up and up homes. So second level, third, fourth, but nothing at the bottom level of the home market. And they're driving prices too high. Why? Regulatory costs are high, causing land prices to go up. And if land prices go up, then the house price has to go up much more to make it pencil out economically. Problem number one. Problem number two, there are no workers. The worker shortage in construction is particularly acute. There are fewer workers in construction total, not just res, but commercial, industrial, whatever, than there were 10 years ago. There are fewer. There's about 5% fewer today than then. The problem is really acute, and the wages are higher. So there's land is more expensive, workers are more expensive, money is more expensive. Thank you very much, Mr. Banker. And lumber prices, for example, and other inputs are up. Not a lot, but they're up too. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, Chinese imports like washing machines and dryers are more expensive. These poor builders can't make any money at the low end, so they stop building. The only saving grace right now in the housing market is inventory. It's going up. You can't see it on this graph, but I'll show you the next graph, you'll see it. Inventory's up. Here, look at this. Oh, wrong color. There we go. Look, oh, wrong way. Here we go. The black, thick black line is year-over-year change in inventory. And you can see that for all this time here, it was below zero. It was shrinking. Inventory was shrinking. Up. Finally, up. Hooray, up. Why is it going up? Because interest rates are a little bit higher, and prices have gotten so high that people just simply can't afford to buy the home anymore. You've pushed out people. Yeah, the job growth is good, and there are always winners every year who have good jobs and save money and have down payment, or they rob a bank, or maybe they don't rob a bank. They go to their parents, they beg their parents for money. I can't wait for that to happen. My daughter wants like a $200,000 for a down payment. Oh yeah, that's gonna make my day. But I digress. And the inventory is rising. You can see in some places like Las Vegas, it's way up. In Seattle, up over 100%. So now I hear people say, oh no, inventory's growing like huge. And I go like, calm down, calm yourself. We had 2 hours of inventory, now we have 4 hours of inventory. You want to have like 6 months of inventory, right? You go from a month to 2 months. Yes, it's a 100% increase, but it's still much too small. Let's go back a couple slides here. Now, this, if you see this increase in inventory, that's a frigging calamity. If you see this, that's normal. So distinguish, understand that up isn't always bad. Up here is good. Up will put declining pressure on house prices. This inventory increase is good because you can see here, price increases for homes are going down. And that's exactly what we need. At the peak here, recent peak, it was almost 7%. What was wage growth? 3 or 4. House price increases at 7. Now, house price increases are roughly 4. House prices are coming down growth to wage growth. This is a good thing. Let's hope it lasts longer. And because there's more inventory, people like you or me can look for a house and not have to be nervous. Oh, I'll buy the first thing I find. Or I'll give up and won't even look. And there are all these other problems with the housing market. People who got mortgages a couple years ago, right? They're paying, 3.25% on their 30-year mortgage. They're not getting a new house. They'll keep their house or rent it out or never sell it or stay living in it. And there are boomers who are deciding to age in place. They're not moving down. They're going to keep their house. You got all these weird things that are going on, depriving the housing market of inventory. Builders aren't building, homeowners aren't selling, and so on. It's a bit of a problem. Last but not least, or not last, there's tax reform took place a year and a few months ago, December of 17, and they maximized the deductions you could take for state and local taxes at $10,000. So what's your income taxes? Let's say they're 8. What are your property taxes? Let's say they're 5. 8 and 5 is 13. You can deduct now 10. That's it, 10. You live in New York. Your income taxes are 20. Your property taxes are 25. That's $45,000. How much can you deduct? 10. So what are folks doing? They're moving to low-tax jurisdictions. People like me are seriously thinking of moving to Florida. Weather's great, and there's no income tax. And since I can't deduct it, it's even more painful than it was before. So you're getting people, the value of a home, a high-priced home, is reduced because the owner of that home now can't deduct all their income and property tax. At the low end, it doesn't matter. They're going to take the standard deduction anyways. But the higher up you go in income, the less valuable the home is. That's pushing downward pressure on home prices and sales as well. And you're seeing it in Manhattan and places like that. And you can see in this graph when the housing market turned over. It didn't turn over overnight, but it turned over. If you look on the far left of the graph, the red, 2018 pending sales were near the top. But by December, they were at the bottom. And it occurred somewhere around here between March and July. Again, I was in Denver, and they had some really good data. You could see in July, June, July, that was the magic. Up until June, 18 was better, 18 was better than 17. But in July, it switched, and 17 was better than 18. So somewhere mid-year, the housing market turned over. Nationally, it varies from place to place. Existing home sales as a result are weakening. They're not awful, but there's not enough inventory. It's going up a little bit, prices are coming down, interest rates are lower. That's why I think 19 will be at least as good as 18, maybe 1 or 2% better, but nothing really meaningful. We're not going to see a big change because things are still quite expensive, and they're still getting more expensive at 4% a year here. They're not getting a freebie here. But interest rates are lower now, and they'll stay low for a while. The Fed's not going to raise rates that fast, if they raise at all. That'll keep 30-year rates down a bit, and that'll help buyers buy homes. That's a good thing. In terms of first-time mortgage applications, they're flat. They're up a little. Volume's not up. We see that here, no volume up. But prices keep going up by 4 or 5%, and that helps. This is total volume. It's dollars times units. So even though units are flat or declining, dollars amount are up. In terms of refi activity, forget it. If you're a bank or a credit union and you have a refi office, just fire them all. Or give them a gun, let them have a bullet or two, and they play Russian roulette, and in a few weeks the office is gone, and they're happy because it's stressful not to have work. The phone doesn't ring, no one calls. It'll be a pleasure to pull the trigger. Yeah, okay. Last but not least, there's no credit bubble. As I mentioned earlier, mortgages aren't going to undeserved people. So if we have a recession, and if house prices fall by 5 or 10%, we're okay. Look, the credit quality, this is FICO score of the median buyer on top in green, the bottom quartile in red, flat, and the bottom decile in blue. They pay higher rates as you go down because the risk is bigger, but there's been no deterioration in credit quality. These people can afford the homes they're buying. They're putting enough of a down payment on their 3, 5, 10%, whatever it is. They can withstand a small decline in home prices. They're not going to have a house of cards like we had once before. The housing market is fundamentally very different, much stronger than it was. And debt service, the debts are fine. What percentage of your disposable personal income are you spending on your debts? It's very low. If you look here, this is stupendously low. Now, by contrast, the peak here, this is right before a recession. It goes high. Right before a recession, it's high. Here it didn't. We didn't have one. But the last couple times we broke a record and we had a recession. We broke a record and we had a recession. Now it's way down because interest rates are low and households are much more responsible. The one exception, student loans, and who cares about them because we own them all, right? And eventually we're going to pay off all the student loans, you and I will. It's $4,000 a person. Don't be unhappy about it. It's good for America. I'm kidding. I'm not bitter. Not bitter. Not bitter. Last, but here, household formation's excellent. This is demographic problems that we face. This housing demand will continue because household formation's good right now, because job growth is excellent, and we had deferred household formation. Kids want to get out of their parents' house. They couldn't afford to go. They had nowhere to go. They had no money. Now they have a job. They're moving out. But there's no place to buy or rent because there's no inventory. Household formation's good, and demographically, the biggest clump of millennials are 26, 27. And in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they'll be in their early 30s, and that's when home buying takes off like a rocket, and they'll want to buy homes. So we have good household formation, demographic factors that used to be pushing multifam are now pushing single fam, and home ownership's going up. So you put this together, we need more homes, we're not building enough, get the builders to build more, make regulations easier. I got a few more slides and we'll wrap it up. Let's talk about local demographics, local economy. So those of you who don't know where you live, there's a red arrow over Wisconsin. The schools here are good. University of Wisconsin-Madison, one of the best schools in the country. I shouldn't have a problem there, but just in case. So you're doing pretty well. You happen to be living in the wrong part of the country. You can see this whole funnel, right? It goes from the northeast in Maine all the way to the western tip of Montana, and it falls down in Louisiana. No one wants to live there. Given that you live in the wrong part of the country, look how high you are, the red arrow on the right. You're almost at the very top of these mediocre states. Congratulations to you. People love to live here. No one wants to move here, and a few folks move away, but by and large, you're doing well with the deck of cards you got. You don't have the weather of Southern California. That's just the way it is, right? But you're doing okay here. You're one of the fastest growing of the brown states there. That's wonderful. How about contemporaneous data? Coincident economic indicators for Wisconsin, they're fine. Leading economic indicators, don't go east. Don't cross the river, don't cross the lake. Don't go to Michigan, you'll get a disease. Don't email your friends there. Don't visit. Don't drive up there. No, fly around to Canada if you have to, but do not fly across Michigan. It could bring back an illness, could be bad. Population growth, the story here is pretty much the same as it's always been. Outagamie is the story. Outagamie in blue has the same population growth as the U.S. in the fat black line is U.S., Outagamie in blue, and the other states, the other counties, Winnebago and Calumet are poorer performers. I don't understand. Calumet's like it's like a manic. It's manic. They're up and down. They don't take their medicine or something. I don't know what it is. On average, it's the same as other places. Wisconsin is in purple. So it's okay. It's just weird. Why up and down? I don't know what's going on. Gross domestic product I looked at the 4 cities. I looked at, US 45 or 41? 41? So I'm taking a road trip. We're starting north in Green Bay in blue, Appleton is in red, Oshkosh is in green, and Fond du Lac is in purple. You can see they're all traveling in very much the same speed on the road. Everything's pretty good here, it really is. There's no real problems. You had a bad year in 2012, and if anybody knows what it is, let me know. I'm curious to know about it. But you're okay. This is fine growth. You're roughly on par with the US. It's good news. Not great, but fine. Your unemployment rates are crazy low. You have to clean my glasses now. Am I making a mistake? Is it really between 2.6 and 2.8? The country is 4. You are vastly lower than the country. This is becoming now, I think, a very serious problem for you is your inability to find workers is going to slow your economy down here because you're bumping at levels that are remarkably low. Hang outside jails, and as the guys walk out, hey, I have a job for you. I build nuclear rockets. Can you help? No experience? No problem. We'll give you a loan, get a car, and we'll get you going right away. I mean, you got to hire who's available. Get anybody you can. This is the best market for people. Grab people who haven't worked in a few years if you can train them. But this is unbelievable. So look at your labor force growth. This is interesting. This is really interesting. So labor force is people who are working and people who are looking for work, both, all right? And look what's happened to your labor force growth over the last 2 years, right? Through 16, it was going up. You see here this trend? You got it? And what the hell happens at the end of 16? Down. And miserable, stinking, no good Oshkosh. Oh my God, look at this. They're shrinking. People are running away, you know? I don't know what's going on. I don't want to say disparaging things about Oshkosh. I'm sure it's lovely. I think I landed there or something. I'm not sure. But look here. Even on the other places, it's gone from roughly 1 or 1.5% growth to 0. Your labor force isn't growing. You've run out of workers effectively, right? But look at employment growth. So this is payroll growth here. It's still going up. Here, it's actually going up faster. This is crazy. Look at Appleton. You were bumping along nicely, had a bit of a near-death experience there, and then you skyrocket. And you know, even all these, even miserable Oshkosh is doing okay here. You're all growing. You're all growing here, but go back one slide. It's 0 to declining. This cannot continue. You can't keep getting employment up with no new workers coming in, right? So that's why your unemployment rates got to these super low levels, and you've got to import workers from somewhere else, right? In terms of worker availability, going back to the survey that the Chamber did, you can see the same problems that nationally, that I talked about, we talked about nationally, that I showed you earlier with your labor force and employment growth. Here's the data from the survey that the Chamber conducted. Sure enough, how about qualified workers? Not a chance. There's no one here. We're going to hell here. We're going to labor hell. This is a disaster. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but this is a problem, and you see it in the data. Average, okay, and worst. So best is going down, worst is going up. You're short workers. Kidnap them. I don't know. Projected employment next year, down. The increase is declining, and the decrease is going not quite up as last year, and they remain the same as here. So here is not quite so bad, but not great, not great. Projected salary increases for next year, the further up you go, higher salary, higher salary, higher salary. So that's the saving grace. You may be running out of workers, but you're not stupid. You realized, oh, I'll pay more money. That maybe will solve the problem. Well, at least that's an intelligent response. Kidnap people and pay them more money. Together, that's a very good idea. I only have so many good ideas to share with you here, you know? You got to work yourself a little bit here. Home construction's weak. It never really recovered. You can see here on the bottom, the gray bar is the recession of 8-9, right? And since then, there really hasn't been much improvement. Brown County's up a little bit, but everywhere else is pretty much flat. And last but not least, I think, 2 more slides and then we're done. This is house prices. They've recovered everywhere, and they all move together. All these 4 towns on the highway, on the U.S. route there, they're all doing the same. There's no distinguishable difference. House price appreciation is pretty much the same. My last slide is this. This is, again, your own data that I'm showing you, and it's interesting data. So you ask 2 questions. On the far left, is this a nice place to live? And 90% of you say this is a nice place to live. So obviously you like where you live. Very good. Then we ask you, is it a good place to work and do business? And only like 75% of you do. So obviously it's a better place to live in than do business. So what you have to do, my challenge to you guys, is to make your place a better place to do business next year or over the next few years. And you bring them the 75 up to 90. That's what I want to see you do. I want you to see you maximize everything you can. Make yourself as economically desirable to employers and employees to move here as you possibly can. You can't change your weather, you can't change a lot of things, but you can change to a large extent or some extent your environment, right? The economic and the vitality of your community. I want you to focus like a laser on that. What you can control is what you should work on, and friggin' ignore the rest. You cannot deal with the rest, don't bother, but you're not victims here. You control your fate to some extent. Do what you can. This is my name, my cell number, my website, my Twitter handle. I put out every day, 5 days a week, 70 words on economics. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. If you want to get it, you can give me your business card. You can leave your business card right here, and I'll pick it up. You can go to my website, or you can text the word bow tie. 6 letters, no hyphen, and no space, so suppress the spell checker, to the 5-digit number 22828. You will then be prompted for an email. So you're signing up for an email by text. You will hear from me every day till you die. So you may want to reconsider this. This is a very long-term commitment between you and I. The economy is now fine. We are cooling. GDP growth will slow. Finding workers will get harder, but the Fed's very unlikely to raise rates, and if they raise them, they're going to raise them at most once. We should, by all rights, avoid a recession this year. We may well avoid one next year, but I can tell you we're going to virtually guaranteed avoid one this year. We'll see what happens in the future, and Wisconsin's a great place. You love living here. Make it a little more hospitable for little business, and that's about all you can do, and be prepared to look hard for workers and offer them more money if they don't want to come with what's going on right now. I'll be hanging around after here taking questions as long as the last person's here. Thank you very much for sponsoring the event. Thank you to the Chamber for bringing me out. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you. As Elliot mentioned, he pulled a number of slides. The booklet was under your salad plate today, so this is all the data that was gathered from the survey if you want to take it home and review it a little bit more. With that, I'd also like to thank our sponsors once again. WHPY for our media sponsor, Fox Communities Credit Union as our sponsor, and Investors Community Bank. Once again, looks like we got another good year, not great year, good year for us going forward, and make it the best year possible. Thank you very much.
Don't believe me, just watch.